to another edition of the High Stakes Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Ambrosius. I'm here with NFBC charter member Clark Olson. Clark, welcome to the show.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me here. Okay, so I reached out to you this last week and I asked you if you'd join me on the podcast. You said you'd be delighted to do it, but you said you're going to be a boring interview. Now, I know you're a scientist. I know scientists are boring, but I've seen you with your hair down, so you're going to be wild in this interview, right?
Well, we'll give it a shot.
See, there we go. All right, so let's give a little background to who you are and what you've accomplished in high-stakes fantasy sports. So you joined the NFBC in our debut season of 2004. You are ranked 5th in the main event by KJ Duke's system. You have the 6th most main event league titles with 6 in 18 years. You also won the NFFC Primetime Overall Championship, $150,000 in 2016. You've won 10 Primetime League titles. You rank 4th in that category. You're 15th in the NFFC career earnings list. So you've done pretty well for yourself. Talk about high-stakes fantasy competition and what it takes with the grind to win a national title and league titles like that.
Well, I don't know if there's that much grind. I do some, obviously, prep work, but before the season, and Fab is, a bit of work each week. But I don't think it's too much of a grind. Mostly it's fun. So if it feels like a grind, then you're probably doing it wrong. That's what my friend Eric Slipperin says, who teams with me on some of my football teams.
So what's more enjoyable, the prize money or the competition that you've got in our high stakes?
That's a good question. I would say the competition. Even when I wasn't winning, I was still having fun with it and still doing it. And so I won very early in the NFBC, but I went through a bit of a dry spell where I wasn't winning so much. Fortunately, I've been doing quite well most recent years, and so the prize money's been pretty nice.
Yeah, the baseball, football, you've been on a pretty good run here since 2016 as well. We'll talk about your history in a little bit, but let's just show people how boring you really are. Okay, let's talk about what you were doing for a living in the late 90s before you joined the NFBC. You worked at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, where you helped develop techniques for the Mars Rover. Talk about that a little bit. We don't have too many Mars Rover scientists in high stakes.
Yeah, well, my background is in computer science, and so my specialty is computer vision, and so understanding digital images. And so what I was working on was for computer vision for Mars Rover, so it could run around on Mars and kind of understand where it was and what it was looking at, and that was a lot of fun. I didn't really work on the mission teams themselves. I was developing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, at least one of them has flown to Mars. But it's a pretty fun area.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so you graduated from the University of Washington with a BS degree in computer engineering, an MS degree in electrical engineering. You have a PhD in computer science from Berkeley, and you've been a professor for the last 2 decades. So How does all of that work into fantasy sports?
Well, it doesn't that much, except that I guess I use some algorithmic techniques and some I use Excel spreadsheets a lot particularly for baseball, but also a little bit for baseball and kind of accumulating stats and ranking players based on which stats are good and which aren't. So there's a little bit of understanding algorithms and a little bit of just computational thinking, but I don't think you need a PhD in computer science to succeed in fantasy sports.
So were you ahead of your time then with spreadsheets and such like that when it came to fantasy sports?
A little bit, probably. I've been doing my own spreadsheets for baseball since the very beginning, and I know most people go in with software or spreadsheets developed by outside sources. But for baseball, at least, my spreadsheets are entirely my own creation.
Cool. All right, so you're a charter member of the NFBC. You joined us in 2004. You've played all 18 years with us. You were involved with the World Championship of Fantasy Baseball in 2003. They were using my rules at the time because we could not form a partnership or whatever. You drafted with Meatloaf at that time. Tell us how you first got involved in high stakes. I know you were playing on ESPN.com. How did you get involved with high stakes?
Well, so yeah, I was playing on ESPN since the early '90s,
Mm.
and I was is part of they started the so-called Uber challenge where you got points for all of the different sports, and I was kind of into that the very first year that I did, and I was on the leaderboard in the top 50 or whatever, and there
Hmm.
was this group that called themselves the leaderboard, and so Dave Cushard, who was kind of the organizer there, invited me to join them, and so I did. And kind of took off from there. I got more and more interested and I was one of the top players on ESPN for several years. I finished third in the Uber challenge and then second and then third and then third. I couldn't quite get to the top until 2006 when in fact I did win the Uber challenge, and then I went
Yep.
on to win it a couple more times after that.
Mm.
But I was so into fantasy sports, and when the high stakes competition started up, I was like, wow, that sounds like a huge amount of fun. It was not cheap, but obviously
Mhm.
for somebody where I was at the time. I was actually in the very first World Championship of Fantasy Football, which I think was the earliest of the high stakes
Yep.
contests. And have been participating in football every year since, and in baseball since the very beginning as well. And so it's obviously something that I find a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we lost Meatloaf last week. You drafted with him. He was your partner, I know, with the WCFB. I don't know if you were partners in the NFBC or not, but
A little
talk
bit.
about Meatloaf and just his love of fantasy baseball, his love of baseball itself. I mean, people don't realize this guy was an intense competitor, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, the way I got in touch with him is he was part of the leaderboard group as well because he was a
Hmm.
very, very active player on the ESPN fantasy games, and he would
Right.
have tons of teams there and earlier, on CompuServe or whatever. He was playing all over the place. And so when the WCFB was starting, I think it was the second year of the WCFB. I'm not sure I wanted to do two high stakes by myself that year, and so I actually put out on the leaderboard. Is there anybody who wants to share a team with me? And Meat's like, hey, yeah, I want to do it. And I'm like, for a second, I was like, well, Meat, I'm looking for somebody to play with me, not just be a financial backer. And he's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah. And so of course he came to the draft, and we were sitting there drafting. And he was totally involved, the whole time, and is
Yeah.
really excited about it for sure.
Yeah, and he was a good player, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely,
I know
absolutely.
he played on Prodigy, he played Baseball Manager. He loved Baseball Manager. And when I first interviewed him in '93, he had to tell me he won 5 out of his 10 leagues and he was very competitive. And he won a NFFC Classic League title in 2005 as well. But I mean, people don't realize this guy was really a competitive player.
Yeah, we finished third that year that we teamed up for that league,
Really? Yeah.
and we won a little tiny bit of money that we actually put into. I think it was the very first NFBC Ultimate. I teamed up with Dave Cushard and Meat and
Uh,
another guy, I think. And we didn't do that well, but that's kind of where we went. The funny thing then is Meatloaf, gets invited to celebrity gigs as well, and so they had the NBA Cares Celebrity Basketball League that he got invited to. Unfortunately, he was on stage during the draft, so he knew where to turn, and so I drafted his team, and it was like Bill Simmons was kind of the host, and Samuel L. Jackson and George Lopez, and Kid Rock and Pam Anderson were sharing a team. They were married briefly. They were actually broke up before the season was over. It's really funny. Bill Simmons, had won the
yeah.
previous year and was making all these statements about how he could never lose a celebrity a basketball league or anything like that. But
Yeah.
the Kid Rock Pam Anderson team took him down in the semifinals, and then of course Meatloaf and I won in the finals. But
Nice one.
nice chunk of money for his charity.
Uh, Beautiful. So, yeah. So I know Dave has gone to his concerts and he would see him and bring him backstage and stuff. Did you ever go to Meat's concerts?
Yep. I went once. We did the little meet and greet, and I didn't tell him in advance because it had been a few years since we drafted together. It was also a
Yeah.
little test for him. So my wife and I went through the meet and greet line, and he's like, "Clark, it's you!" And I was like, I thought that was great that he recognized and remembered me. And so he said, stick around, and after the meet and greet, we'll go backstage and
Yeah.
chat. And he was a really nice guy. So
Cool. Very, very good. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the ESPN leagues because those free leagues or were they just very small entry fees?
most of most of they had competitions in all kinds of different sports, and most of them were free. But for the 4 major sports, you had to pay, and they wasn't a lot. For $50 you'd get 5 teams or something, or 3 teams. I don't remember. So it's small entry, but for the 4 major sports that you did have to pay for those.
Right. So Uber, to be the Uber champion, you had to compete in all their sports, which included, I believe, bass fishing. Is that correct?
Yep. Bass fishing, NASCAR, horse racing. It ran the gamut. So.
Yeah, and so you had to compete in all of those, and Meat was doing that. You were doing that. Like you said, you were very close to winning. Then you finally won in 2006. And in fact, I saw a 2007 New York Times story written about you, which is where I got a lot of this information. I mean, that's pretty heady stuff back then, 2007, being written up in New York Times and such.
Yeah. I think it was somebody from ESPN who kind of put them in contact with me, and I got a lot of notoriety from that. And people who otherwise would not have even known I played fantasy sports were like, wow, that's kind of interesting. So.
Yeah. So what did you get now? They gave out T-shirts, I believe, if you won like your leagues or whatever. Do you have a whole closet of T-shirts? And then what'd you get for being the Uber champion?
Well, the Uber champion was a little bit better. They'd send you a trophy, but then the first 2 times I won Uber, they it was an all expenses paid trip to the ESPYs.
Oh, okay.
And that was pretty cool. And there was an after party, and you could walk down you didn't get, you weren't with the celebrities walking down the red carpet, but you got to go to the side of it and see them. And, I got pictures of Sam Jackson and other people from going to the ESPYs. Now it would have been cool if they had me on stage getting an award.
Yeah, definitely. So how many times did you win Uber? I only knew of one.
I won twice more after that. I was the first person to win 3 times. And it turns out there was one other later person that did that as well.
So do they still do the Uber or not? I don't.
Nope. 2015, they canceled the Uber challenge. And I have not played a fantasy sport other than baseball or football since that time.
On ESPN, you mean?
Anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Really the only reason I was doing those was because of the Uber challenge.
Well, you're not up on your bass fishing, I guess, then. But
nope,
I know that was popular. Meat liked that. He would talk about how he was good at the bass fishing. He would tell me. I think Dave said he was too.
You have to be good at everything to win Uber. So.
Very good. Okay, let me bring you back memory lane. So WCFB was 2002, 2003. I came back in 2004. Said I'm going to start my own. I know you got my rules and such, and so we both competed. And we knew that Meat was in WCFB already. He wanted to be with us as well. And so we actually staggered the times. We were going to be at 10 a.m. on that Saturday at the Rio. And then WCFB was at MGM Grand at 3 o'clock. And I actually got a bus so that we could bus all you leaderboard sports guys over to MGM Grand so that everybody was able to get there on time. Do you remember any of this at all or not?
Vaguely. I remember both of the drafts. I don't remember the bus that well, but I remember the discussion of it and whatnot. And so I don't remember the actual ride.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was heady times, and that was last year that they were in WCFB, and then we continued on after that. Meat was actually in the 2005 Ultimate Auction League, and that was the year he did the NL on Friday, he did the main event on Saturday, he did the auction on Sunday. And when he got done, he said, "Greg, do you have any more? I love these." So that's just how he was. He really just loved that whole thing.
Yeah, it was a blast drafting with him, and you could tell he was enjoying himself.
All right, so let's talk about NFBC. You joined the NFBC in 2004. You won a main event league title right away. You finished 11th overall. 2005, you win another main event league. We only have one time for them, so you can only enter one league. You're 2 for 2 now. You finished 13th overall that year, I believe. So you're 11th overall, 13th overall. You're 2 for 2. You've got it all figured out, right? What was the beauty of the success at that point?
Johan Santana.
Yeah.
So I think I drafted him pretty early in 2004, and I actually got off to a shaky start that year, but my second half was just incredible, and he was a big part of it. I think he might have been my first round pick the next year, and he was a monster that year. So
yeah.
Certainly, I don't know. I guess the lesson was to draft Johan Santana every year at that point.
Come on, you got to have more than Johan Santana to win the NFBC.
A little bit. I remember drafting. See, I don't actually watch a lot of games, and so I mispronounce names. I remember drafting Bobby Abreu that year.
Yeah.
The auctioneer, it wasn't an auctioneer. The draft guy, doing the stickers had to correct me. Bobby Abreu, and I'm like, oh. Okay, I guess that's the thing. No.
So do you watch a lot of baseball now, or you still are more a numbers guy than a scout?
No, more of a numbers guy.
Really?
I follow the the games online, or I might have a game on, beside me. I
Hmm.
go to a small number of games each year, but it's really more the stats than the watching.
Hmm. You're not alone. There's other people like that. Gecko talks about that all the time, how he doesn't watch a lot of baseball, but he dives into the numbers an awful lot. Okay, so now you win the first 2 years, and then you don't win anything. I mean, you have a dry spell until 2012. You win your third main event league title there. You finish 14th overall. What's the reason for the drought then, you think?
I don't know. Overconfidence, bad luck, not drafting enough steals every year.
Hmm.
I don't have a good explanation for it. Like you said, I thought I had it all figured out after 2 years, and then
Yeah.
then things just kind of went haywire for a while before I kind of got back on the horse.
Well, you're back on the horse right now because you've won main event league titles in back-to-back years, 20 and 21. You've got 6 main event league titles right now. So do you feel like you're back on track? Is the algorithms working now, or what's going on?
I think so. I think so. Maybe it's just finding the right places to get projections from.
Hmm.
Unlike some people, I mostly don't do my own projections. I'm mostly about taking other projections and putting them together in different ways, and kind of stat evaluation is more of my forte rather than projecting individual players.
Hmm. So, okay, you know a thing or two about winning national championships. You haven't won a national championship in baseball, but you did in football. You won the 2016 NFFC Primetime, $150,000 grand prize. Talk about that magical season. You had a partner, I believe, with that team as well. How did things go there? How did that turn out to be a championship team?
So that team, I usually do 4 NFFC teams a year, 2 by myself and 2 with a good friend of mine from
Okay.
high school, Eric Slippern. That one that I won the overall was actually by myself. So
Okay.
I got to keep all the prize money for that one. But he was involved in several of my other teams that have finished high overall. Like we finished 5th overall in 2019 and
Hmm.
16th overall in 2018. So I had a nice run there for a while.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty magical. Oddly, I only finished 3rd in my league that year. I wasn't a
Really?
dominant
Hmm.
team. And AJ Green was my number 1 pick, and he was hurt towards the end of the year. But I was doing really, really well in the playoffs. And everybody on my team week 15, except for Adam Thielen, was going off. Adam
Yeah.
Thielen had a 0. He did not score a point that week.
Yep.
But it got me near the top and going into week 16 that year, when all the games were
Yep.
on Saturday because of a holiday or whatever.
Yep.
We were going into that, and I had AJ Green in my lineup and Adam Thielen on my bench because he put up a 0 the previous week. And then it came out that, well, AJ Green was still injured and he wasn't going to be able to play that week. I said, well, I better put Adam Thielen in my lineup again. And then he goes off for 40 points that
Yep.
week,
Yep.
and basically, helped win me the national championship.
Yeah, which is why you got to wear a Thielen jersey to our drafts most of the
I
time,
wear it.
right?
I wear it to the main event every year. Yep.
Yeah, you never forget something like that. It's like when Aaron Jones went off a couple of years ago, and people now wear that jersey because he had a huge, huge game against Minnesota on that Monday night game. So, all right, so let's set the stage about how wild you were in 2016. So, we always have a Thursday night viewing party, and we had that one up in the Fountain View Suite at the Bellagio. You had a lot of fun. Took a little of my whiskey back home with you. I got a little mad, then I found out that was a lucky whiskey bottle because that won you the title. That was the key to you winning that year.
Clearly.
And you did come back with a better whiskey bottle for me the next year, right?
Oh yeah. You know what? I think I borrowed from you, and I borrowed back a very nice bottle the next year.
You did. You didn't just borrow because I never saw it back. That bottle never returned with some in it or anything like that. But see, you can let your hair down. I've seen you let your hair down. But that Thursday night viewing party is so much fun. I mean, we must have had 30, 40 people up in there. I remember it was the Broncos and CJ Anderson went off that night, and it was just kind of fun. But, kind of just talk about the camaraderie of the high stakes events and people that you've met in NFBC and NFFC.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's a lot of fun. I go and I see people there that, some of them are the same people every year, but then you meet new people every year as well. And so it's a great group, and everybody's, friendly, wants to talk about football or talk about baseball.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more of an introvert in some ways, but I go there and, you can't not have fun there. So whether
Yeah.
you're an introvert or an extrovert.
Yeah, definitely. It's good stuff. Okay. Talk a little bit about the difference between high stakes fantasy baseball and football. I mean, I always say baseball is a marathon, football is a 100-yard dash. What are your thoughts on the two sports?
Well, I've always thought that there was a little more luck in football. There's a lot more
Mhm.
injuries to running backs. It's a smaller team, and so you're not, aggregating over as many spots. And then with Roto, of course, you have to put, balance over 10 spots as well. You can't just have all running backs or all wide receivers. And so
Right.
I've actually enjoy in some ways. Fantasy baseball more. It's not a better game to watch on TV because for football, I'm in front of the TV all Sunday long,
Right.
watching teams. But for baseball, I'm not watching as much. I'm just kind of following my teams online. So
Yeah.
I guess, football may be a more enjoyable game to watch, but for me, baseball is the better game to play as a fantasy sports player.
Yeah. How about fab though between the two sports? That baseball on Sundays is tough, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a little more of a grind. I think the way you've set things up with watch lists and whatnot, it's a lot easier to get through. And I think the software has improved,
Yeah.
by leaps and bounds over the years. It actually takes me less time now than it did, back in the day.
Oh yeah.
And back then I'd have one team and I'd spend, 4 or 5 hours doing it.
Yeah.
Now I have 4 and I probably spend the same or maybe even less time. Or last year I actually had 5 main event teams for the first time.
So do you work on fab through the week or is Sunday like you're starting from scratch?
Pretty much Sunday. I
Really?
might put them on my watch list throughout the week.
Yeah.
Historically, I've done it almost all on Sunday. Last year, I started a little earlier. On Saturday, I'd review my teams and see where I needed to fill holes and whatnot. But I'd still do all of
Yeah.
the researching players and setting the bids on Sunday.
Let's talk about baseball a little bit. What's the one category that's the toughest for you to fill? You mentioned stolen bases when you were in a drought or whatever. What
Yeah, for me,
is
it's for stolen bases for sure. I don't know if
okay?
it's just I don't value them enough in my algorithm historically. I think I'm getting better at that, and that's why I've done pretty well over the last few years. There have been a lot of years I'll draft a team, and then Sean Childs will come up to me after the draft and look at my team like, "Did you draft enough stolen bases?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, I didn't." And I know that he's always wanted to get something like 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in the first 3 rounds, and
Right.
I've never been like that. I've been, historically more getting a pitcher. I get Johan or I'll get Kershaw in the first round, and
Hmm.
and that might hurt me a little bit on steals. Now everybody's going, pocket aces or whatnot, and so maybe it's a
Right.
little bit easier for me to get stolen bases where I wouldn't have before if I was going a pitcher in the first round.
His plan was 75-75 when you first bring
Okay.
hitters. So you're behind if you're going
Yeah.
50-50 there.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, the game has changed, right? I mean, Phil Desault showed that pocket aces were the key and nailing those starting pitchers. He didn't have to go in the fab and try and find that. The one category that I thought you might say, because people talk about is saves. I mean, obviously, you don't need as many. It used to be about 100, 110 or whatever. Now it's like 80. It's like 80%
Yeah.
now, maybe, right?
Most years I'll get a top closer. Not every team, but I've been even
Yeah.
before they've gone crazy like this year. I'd get 4th, 5th, 6th round. I'd get one of the better closers. And so if you've got that, you've got a little bit more of a base to work with. Then
Yeah.
you can get maybe a middle guy, or maybe if that doesn't work out, you can use Fab a little bit more. But if you've got the kind of the one guy there to kind of boost you up, then it becomes less of a problem, throughout
Yeah.
the rest of the draft.
Absolutely. All right, a couple more ADPs. I mean, they are a big part of our contest right now. We have that out there free for everybody to use. PlayNFBC.com/ADP. But how do you use ADPs or don't you use ADPs?
I absolutely use them. Even if a guy's at the top of my list, I won't take him if I'm making a min pick because I know I can get him a little bit later. And
Right.
unless he's the guy that will make or break my team,
Yep.
I'll wait on him because I can put together a better team by taking somebody else before that, and then that guy will almost always be there, a little bit later if it
Right.
would have been a min pick.
Mhm.
So absolutely, I'm looking at where the people are going in the drafts to kind of strategize on where I should take them.
Yeah, you can sort them by any date, the last 7 days, 10 days, whatever you want. It's very helpful for sure. Check it out if you haven't already. Let me just ask you about advice for anybody trying to get in the NFBC. Okay, this is our 19th year. Someone may look like, oh, I can't get in this. These guys have all this experience ahead of me. Phil, you started in 2017 with us and won everything that was available last year. Any advice for people that are thinking about getting in the NFBC?
Yeah, start small, but work your way up. You've got contests that cost $50 or $100. You don't need to jump in at the main event level, and so you can test yourself even if you don't have that money to spend, or you can be like Phil and jump right into the main event and,
Yep.
and succeed right away.
Yep.
But it's hard for me to give advice to a new player because I've been in it from the beginning, and I'm not
Yep.
sure, not sure what it feels like for a new player anymore.
Well, when we first started, we had the main event and a 1250 NL auction league. That was it, basically. We only had the two. Now online, you can join a main event qualifier for $125. You can do an online championship qualifier for $50. We have $50 draft champions league. So a lot of entry-level areas, which we didn't have when you first joined, for sure. Any thoughts on the lockout? It didn't sound like they made much progress today. What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, well, I a couple of weeks ago, I was optimistic that the season would get started on time. Now it looks like spring training at least will be delayed, and I'm a little less optimistic about the season. I'm hoping that they can get their act together, and there's too much money involved for them to lose a lot of games. So I think they will get something done, but they got to play a little bit of brinksmanship in order to convince each other that they're serious.
I agree with you. I think something's going to get done, but it's not until the money starts getting lost. And that's when, for the players, it's opening day. For the owners, they want to have spring training. They don't want to cancel spring training. So let's hope something gets done by the 15th of this month, and then we can still get a full spring training in. All right. What would it mean to you to win a main event overall title? I know you've won the Primetime in football. You've been battling 18 years. You've been in the top 15 4 different times. What would it mean to win the overall title?
Yeah, that's the best. The football was just incredible. It was just by a slimmest of margins, and so I would wait a few days just to make sure there wasn't a stat correction that was gonna knock me down.
Yeah.
But winning, if I could do that in baseball as well, I mean that would be just like the pinnacle. But doing it in both sports, I can't tell you how great that would make me feel.
Yep, for someone to win them both in the different sports, that would be something else for sure. Chad Schroeder, I believe, is the only one who has done that in the NFBC and the NFFC. All right, last one here. What's that?
John Posma?
Yeah, Posma would have done, right, the main event and the online championship. You're right, Chad and John have done that. No slight to John. He's a fantastic player as well. All right, last one. You're 53 years old. Have you peaked already in fantasy sports, or is the best to come yet?
The best is yet to come. So I've been playing since 2004. That's only 18 years actually in NFFC. So I hope to have at least another 18 years before I'm done, and hopefully in that time I'll build upon what I've done, get a little bit better every year, or maybe I'll decline. We'll see.
Keep going after it, right? I mean, even if you have a small stretch, you're a great player. You've had great success. So I wish you all the best this year in baseball. I will see you at the Bellagio in Las Vegas in March, and looking forward to it, Clark.
Yep, I'm hoping to make it in March. I haven't made my travel plans yet. I'm actually just kind of making sure that the baseball negotiations get settled and whatnot.
You're not alone. We're having a great season for Draft Champions online. Everybody, I think, for the live events is just waiting to see how it all plays out. So,
yep. I'm in 2 Draft Champions already, and I'll be in the 2500 Super in March. So.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. And that was our first time last year. I know it was a lot of fun with MTM. We got the $5,000 one that's close to filling up right now as well. So a lot of good stuff happening at the NFBC. Check us out at playnfbc.com. Clark Olson, one of the best in baseball and football. Thank you very much, and good luck this year.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week with another podcast.